Hi everybody, and thank you for watching. In this video today I'm going to talk a little bit about some things in Mainstage that you can do to get the most out of your performance. We'll take a peek at some of the settings as well as some ways that you can set up your concerts to make them a little bit more efficient. Alright, before we get started here and actually open up Mainstage, I'm just going to show you a few things on the desktop. Before you play live, you want to make sure that none of the other applications are using resources in the background. So I'll go down here to the bar, make sure, so here I have iTunes and Safari open. I'm going to go ahead and quit those. Even though I can't see the window, they're using resources in the background. So get rid of those so I don't have to compete with those. Also make sure, good practice to turn off your Wi-Fi unless you need it for some reason. That just prevents your computer from accessing the internet. I have some things like the cloud account, OneDrive here. I'll quit it, but just want to make sure none of those things are accessing Wi-Fi in the background using disk resources. Another thing I'll look at here, I use this little app, this is Max Fan Control. There's other apps that do exactly the same thing. Basically what this does is allows me to manually set my fan speed. And this is important for me live, especially since I've done some upgrading on my computer. It tends to run on the hot side. So when I'm playing live or doing anything processor intensive, I go ahead and crank it up as fast as it can go. So that way the fan's running continuously as fast as it can. This keeps my components cool, so it helps the components last longer. Also helps the processor be more efficient by keeping the temperature down. Another little tidbit, if you go over here to the sidebar and just click this Do Not Disturb and turn that on, it says it's going to turn off automatically tomorrow, so I can just close it and forget about it. But that just prevents any unnecessary pop-ups from coming up while I'm performing. Also make sure that when you go to play live that you don't have any of your external backup drives hooked up. So I have an external hard drive that I run Time Machine on, so it's not going to be hooked up anyway because I don't take it with me to church. But that's just one extra thing that could be consuming disk resources in the background. All right, now that we've covered a few of those things, let's go ahead and open up Mainstage. All right, so I've opened a concert here that I prepared to show you a few things. Let's first start out, let's look at some preferences. If you go to the General tab, and then there's this preference for auto-saving, I'd go ahead and turn that to never. And the reason for that is when you're in editor layout mode, it auto-saves at these increments. And this has been a problem for some people where when that autosave kicks in, you get audio dropouts and different problems. If you run your concerts in perform mode, it shouldn't be a problem. It turns that autosave off. But while you're designing, and then also if you tend to run live in edit mode anyway, go ahead and turn that to never. If we go to the audio tab, sample rate, you'll hear that talked about. The default is 44.1 or 48. Just leave it at that. There's no need to run it higher. It uses more resources, really gives you, for live especially, negligible difference in your audio quality. All right, so we'll click here on advanced settings and we'll take a look at some of the latency settings. This is the CPU usage, the driver latency, and the INO safety buffer. I usually leave those just how you see them there. The INO buffer size, we'll talk a little bit about that. Basically, the lower the buffer size, the less latency you have, which is good if you are playing something like a piano or some really responsive instrument. However, that puts more strain on your processor, and so we try to find a balance somewhere in between. Usually 128 or 256 is an acceptable number for a good balance between latency and your processor. If you try to run higher, or if you have to run higher for some reason, your processor is having trouble and you keep bumping it up, then you might want to look at some other sources of your problems. Usually you can get away with 128 or 256. Also keep in mind latency has more to do than just these settings. Latency can be impacted by things such as your audio interface as well as other stuff, but we won't talk about all that right now in this video. All right, so the next thing I want to show you here is the CPU meter. It's right up here at the top. However, if you double click it, it pulls up this nice handy window, kind of breaks everything down by plug-in, shows you what's using exactly how much of your processor. So this is really helpful, or can be helpful to diagnose problems if the processor is actually your problem. So we'll leave that open here so I can illustrate a few things. This folder I loaded in a whole bunch of patches. There's 55 total. And did this to illustrate, some people like to have all their patches in a single concert so they can access them at any given moment. Some people will have all their songs and then move the 5 or 6 that they're going to use up to the top and then just leave the rest loaded in like that. And the advantage of that is everything's in one place. The disadvantage of that, however, is you can run into some problems with resources that even the ones you don't have active may still be using resources in the background. Just to illustrate that, I'm going to flip through here. And I'm just playing. And here I get a system overload message. So I'm done with that. We'll go back up to the top. Yet I'm still using here over 300, the meters up to over 300%. So you can see I could quickly run into some problems with my processor, and I'll get some audio dropouts. I'll get errors like the pop-up that you saw. So I just find it good practice to not have all my patches in my concert that I'm actively using. So a couple ways around this. One is you could save a copy of your concert and then just delete all the ones you're not using, so you only have the 5 or 6 that you need for that weekend. Another way that you can get around this is the patch library. This is the way I prefer to keep my patches. I have them all loaded in down here in different folders. So we click out here and you can see there they are. So I can just click and there it is. I've loaded it in. And if I make changes, then I can just save as a patch and overwrite. So if you're wondering how you arrange your patches that way, there's a specific folder you can put them in, and I have it loaded up here already. This is in my user folder, music, patches. And then in that patches folder, you can put whatever you want, however you think you need to organize it. And you can see that this here matches this exactly. And these are .patch files. So I save all my patches here. All right, so back to this window. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this folder with all those patches. And it'll take it a minute. All right, there we go. So I've eliminated all that processing that was going on in the background just by deleting some of those extra patches. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at here is something called aliases. So here I have 4 different patches. If I flip through them, you can see they have different patches, but I have this piano, this Steinway piano in every single one because I want to use that in all 4 patches. Well, as we saw earlier, having 4 instances, so it's the same piano, but it's in 4 different places, that's going to use potentially 4 times as much processing power, even in the background, as we just saw earlier. So the way to make that a little more efficient, I'm going to go ahead and delete the piano from the other 3 patches. All right, we'll go up here, click on the Steinway piano file, or edit, copy, click on the next patch, and then paste as alias. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat that for each one. So then now you can see as I flip through, this piano is now in every single patch, yet Mainstage only sees it as one channel strip. Okay, a quick way to know which one's the alias is this little green arrow at the top. That can tell you, so if you go to each of the patches, the green arrow, that's the alias. If you don't have these little icons, if you right click, it's badges. Right click again, badges. So there you go. All right, so again, the advantage of aliases is you only use one instance of the channel strip instead of 4 or 5 or however many places you have that instrument. Disadvantage of using aliases is you can only have one version of it. So if I get rid of this tape delay, If I go to the next channel or the next patch, it's also lost the tape delay. So I can't do custom effects. It's literally only one copy. So you just have to decide if you really need it to be different in each of the patches, then go ahead and make it your own channel strip. Otherwise, Aliases is a great way to duplicate patches, to duplicate channel strips. Another way you can do this, I'm going to go ahead and delete the piano of these aliases just so I can show you. All right, we'll take this piano here. Again, we're going to copy it. I'm going to go up to the concert level. I'm going to paste, not as an alias, just paste the actual channel strip. Yes, I want to create it there. And then we can go ahead and get rid of the other one. So now, again, it's present in all of these patches, and I can use it in all those patches. The advantage of putting it at the concert level is there's no dropout or switch when you change patches. So say you had a pad that you wanted to use, especially for transitions, you could have your pad and you hold out your pad, and even when you switch patches, that exact same pad keeps on going, and there's no audio dropouts. You have a nice smooth transition. So again, the disadvantage is there's only one version. You can only have it in one place. In order to properly use a concert level channel strip, let's look here. So you look at my layers. Notice you don't see this Hillsong B3 in my layers. So what happened to it? Well, I can only see this one. Well, if we click and go to the layer editor, there is a setting here called Override Parent Ranges, and it's set to off right now. I can choose Replace. And so what Replace does is now I only have the patch level instrument, and I don't have the concert level instrument anymore. If you do Add, it then adds both of them together so that you have both your patch level and your concert level. Now you have to do that for each patch individually, but it gives you some flexibility if you want a concert level instrument in some patches but not all patches. It gives you a little flexibility to mess around with that. All right, we're going to move on to our next section here. Talk about buses and layering. Let's talk about buses first. So I have these two channel strips here to illustrate a point. So I've clicked on them both, loaded them in. So you can see I'm using right around 35% of my CPU. So this big yellow part, this is why this little graph is helpful, because you can see exactly which effect it is. So you can see that's Space Designer. Now Space Designer I tend to really avoid, especially live. There's some great substitutes for that, and I'll show you that later. But let's just say for now, say you really wanted to use Space Designer. Well, I've got it in all four of these channel strips. So here's 1, there's 2, 3, and 4. So I've got it in 4 different places. So the more places I have it, the more processing it's going to use in the background, especially if you have like 2 channel strips next to each other, so that when I play, it's going to use that twice rather than just once. It'd be nice if we could just use it once. Well, that's where buses come in. So buses, we're going to go up here to the concert level again, and we're going to create ourselves a bus. So we want an auxiliary instrument, or an auxiliary channel strip. And as the input, we can just leave it as bus 1 for now. We don't have any buses yet, so we'll just use number 1 and the output to your main out. So we'll create, yes, we want it at concert level. So now we have a bus. Again, this is your input. This tells you which one it's going to be, and you can choose from any of those. All right, so we're going to go in here, and we're going to find our reverb and add, there's Space Designer. And then you could pick whatever preset you wanted. Okay, so then we'll go down here to our channel strips, our patches, and let's get rid of these extra Space Designer. And you can see I'm gaining processor just by doing that. No plugin, no plugin. Okay, well, to get these to use the Space Designer bus that I just created, you go here to Sends. And again, if you don't see Sends, right click and you can click on Sends. Make sure it's checked. So click on Sends and Bus. And this is the one that we created, Bus 1. Okay, and see now it's popped in. Now that I've selected it, I can see it now. Okay, this is a little volume control. Basically, it tells you how much signal from your channel that you're going to send over to the bus. So if you want more of the effect, then turn it up. If you want less of the effect, turn it down. So we'll turn it up just a little bit. When I put a effect in a bus like this, something to keep in mind with effects, there's what's called a wet mix and a dry mix. The dry mix is the original audio that's not affected. The wet mix is the effect, so the audio with the effect applied, in this case this reverb. So we're going to make sure here in Space Designer the dry mix is all the way down for the bus, and then make sure the wet mix is all the way up. And the reason I do that is because I'm controlling how much the effect I'm using by this. So I just go ahead and set it that way in the bus. So you can see I'm using the effect and changing the volume, the level of that effect. Okay, now that I have this bus here, I want to be able to control it. And so I'm going to just pick this reverb knob that I already have set. And we're going to go to the piano, since that's where my bus is going from. Click on the Sends and Bus 1 Level. Okay, and then you can change the values here as you see fit. And so now I'm turning my knob. You can see up here that it also changes the value down here, like so. So that's one way you can go about mapping this, and in order to give yourself control when you're live. So the way I did it there, that just changes the level for only the piano. But say I also had this organ going as well, and I wanted to control both the reverbs at the same time. Well, then I would map it a little bit differently. So we'll go back up here to the reverb control knob that I used. And instead of going here, I'm actually going to go up to the concert level, because that's where my bus is located. So I have to go to the concert level in order to map with it. So we'll click on my reverb knob, and it's called Auxiliary 1. Auxiliary 1, so click on that. And then I can just map it to the volume control. Okay, and you can see now as I turn my knob, that volume control changes. So this lets me put in a custom amount for each instrument, but then turn it down for all the instruments, or up for all the instruments at the same time. So there's just a couple ways that you can map your buses. You can put whatever you want in a bus. You can layer a bunch of effects, just like here. If you wanted, you can have a delay and your reverb and whatever else there. Or you could, some people, you might want to have a couple different buses for different types of effects. So however works for you. Okay, we're going to go to this next patch that I've created, and you can see here my layers. There's a whole bunch of instruments. And just wanted to use this to illustrate a point. Let's pull up this here again. So you can see a bass line I'm using about 55% of my processing And if I start playing, obviously it goes up really high. Now, these channel strips were not meant to go together. I just picked some random ones, but sometimes people design their sounds and needing 4, 5, or 6 different layers in order to create a sound. So I just want you to keep this in mind as you're designing. Try to do as much as possible within a single instrument. There's different ways to fill out an instrument without having to have multiple layers. Okay, so I'm going to show you one of those ways you can fill out a sound really quick without having to have multiple layers. If you go up here to the MIDI effects, and again, if you don't have it, right click, MIDI effects. Go to MIDI effects, and we're going to add in a chord trigger. All right, so a chord trigger basically, it allows you to map multiple notes to a single key. A very simple way of using it would be to create octaves. And so if I hit learn, here what I'm hitting, these are the notes that I'm hitting physically right here. And then you can see, so now C2 and C3 will be triggered just by hitting C2. So now I only have to hit one note and it's going to play both of those notes. Okay, so now that I've done that, we're going to go back. I'm just going to solo that channel so you can hear. So here it is without the chord trigger. And here's with the chord trigger. So that may let you get rid of some of these extra layers that are floating around. Okay, other things you can do with lots of layers like this. There's a function that's called bypass, and I'm going to show that to you. So you may from time to time want to turn sounds on and off. So here, using the mute, and basically I'm muting all of these different patches. Well, unfortunately that doesn't do anything to help my processor. They're muted. I'm playing, but here I'm using a whole bunch of processor and no sound. So that doesn't help me. However, there's this function called bypass, and what you do, see how this is grayed out? This one's bypassed. So I can do that to all of these. Okay, so that ends up helping a little bit. So now when I hit the keys, it doesn't have that big processor spike like it did before. And so I may have only one on or two on, whatever it is I need on. So use bypass instead of mute when at all possible. And so the way that you use bypass in your concert is you can map it to a button. So here, let's pick this piano, and we're going to map mute, or the bypass to that. So we're going to click on Steinway Grand Piano, because that's what that is. Then we're going to click on EXS24, because it's made by EXS24. This is what we're actually going to be bypassing. And then go to the very top, and there's bypass. Okay, and by default it has when the light is on, that means it's bypassed, and when the light's off it's not bypassed. I like it the other way around, so I just hit invert parameter. So now when the light's on, it's on. When it's off, it's bypassed. And you can see over here, watch when I hit the button. Okay, so it's controlling that. So this is another quick way you can help if you need all of these layers and you want to be able to turn some of them on or off from time to time. Bypass is much better than mute to use. So another advantage of using bypass is it can help listen to here with this pad. Turn it on. So when I hit mute, it cuts off right away. It's a sudden stop. And then it cuts back on. So you can hear that. Okay, if I use bypass, I'm holding it out. If I bypass it, nice and gently fades out. And then when I turn it on, it doesn't suddenly spike up again. Now, I was just testing this now, and I guess with the EXS24 instruments, when you bypass it, it suddenly cuts off. So just kind of keep that in mind. But if it's like a pad or something like that, an ES2, then that's a nice way to get it, to cut it off without it suddenly stopping. Something to keep in mind with bypass is notice all of these effects I have in the different channel strips. It only bypasses the instrument. If I wanted to bypass the effects, because I'm still using a lot of processor here in the background, even though all these are bypassed, I would have to do all that. And you could map a button. You could map one button to all 4 of those items. But again, this is where using buses can be helpful, because then you can really help eliminate some of these different effects that happen to be in the channel strips. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you here is I have 4 different reverbs. They're all bypassed in this channel strip, and my CPU load history is up and running. I'm going to turn these on one at a time. So there's N-verb, uses about 5%, 4 or 5%. Turned off. Platinum verb, around 2%. Silver verb, even less, 1% or so. And then Space Designer settles down around 10% or so. So I just show you this to illustrate why it's nice to pull this up and see what's using resources. Space Designer it produces some really nice reverbs. It tends to be a little bit better for studio type stuff, and this is why. It uses the most resources. So if you really want to use it, put it in a bus. However, Silver Verb tends to be a great alternative. I use it probably more than any other reverb in Mainstage, partly because it only uses so few resources, but it makes really nice sounds. And once you play with it and learn how to change some of the settings, you can really get some great sounds with it. So I just encourage you to take a double look at your concerts and see what it is that you can change, what it is you can make more efficient. Now, if you're not having any problems, your concerts are running fine, you're not having audio glitches, you're not getting warning messages, then that's great. But if you start having audio glitches, these are some things that you can change in your concert that might help. All right, I think that's going to be it for today. There are some things we didn't talk about that have to do with performance. So, use these things that I've showed you to help improve the efficiency of your concert. But if you're having issues, you may need to do more troubleshooting. Please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to work with you, and maybe we can identify what's going on if you are having trouble. Also, feel free to contact me if you have any further questions about how to do some of the things that I showed. Also, if you have further ideas to improve upon the things that I presented here, please contact me. I always like to learn and improve what I'm doing. Thank you for taking time to watch, and have a great day.